to the first out of 3 episodes of the CPO3 podcast series. This is where experts and entrepreneurs meet to support corporate transformation. We talk about how people, technology, and mindset drive business impact. There's no better way than bringing together former corporate senior leaders to discuss different perspectives. My name is Daniel Zinner. I'm the founder of the People Mobility Alliance, and I'm sitting here with my business partners and friends, Alejandro Basterreachea and Alexander Lieder. Starting with you, Alejandro, what brought you here in this crowded, tight room at the Delta campus, recording a podcast with the 2 of us?
Hi, Daniel. Hi, Alex. Good morning, first of all. Thank you very much for organizing the podcast. I think this is a dream come true. We've been discussing this in the last weeks and months of starting a podcast. As you mentioned, we want to bring different perspectives. We might not agree on everything, and I hope we can disagree in a lot. And out of that conversation, we can bring value to the audience, right? Here, as you mentioned, we see 3 different functions. This is what usually happens also in corporates. Different departments, different business units sit together, and they try to solve business problems. And this is the setup that usually you find in different companies. And we want to bring this to a podcast where we're going to discuss different topics, and everybody will bring their perspectives. From my side, Alejandro, I represented procurement, which is a key value driver in any company. It's not being seen like that in different corporations. Some people see procurement as a police of the company or just too transactional, or procurement is process heavy. But I'm going to bring a different perspective on how procurement can really deliver impact and value to corporations. And I hope to convince you as well the role that we play as a value driver in corporations. From my perspective as well, I've been working from different multinational corporations. I started working at Philips, then I did a few years at Metro AG in retail. Then I moved to Bombardier, railway manufacturing. This is where you, Daniel, and myself, we met. And then the last 9 years, I've been building and leading procurement at Zalando. And since very recently, I found my own company with 2 co-founders. So now I'm an entrepreneur. I'm bringing the perspective from a different position, not in the corporate, but again, my customers, they want also to solve business problems, and I'm going to be there to help them navigate through the procurement and jungle. And I hope that together also we can bring an audience some ideas, some solutions, but more important, the right mindset. I think without the right mindset to solve problems with today's technology, for example, it will be very difficult for some companies to really have an impact, to grow, to sell, and so on. And therefore, I'm super happy, super excited to be here with you guys. And also, let's have...
Yeah. Thanks, Alejandro. Just quickly on my side, first of all, I'm really happy, Alejandro, that you're free now, that you're your own boss, yeah, and this is why you find time to hang around with us and discuss the important challenges we are facing in the corporate transformation world. Quick introduction on myself. As I said, I'm Daniel Zinner. I'm the HR guy here, or in the new world, you would say people and culture. My focus is actually cross-border people mobility, which is a kind of a sub-function of HR. I actually came into this field a bit randomly. I started my career at PwC preparing tax returns for Indian inbounds, working for German corporations. So this was more the compliance side. So I'm also very much number driven, I would say, but working in this field, which actually belongs to HR, I came more and more across the people topics, change and mindset, as you mentioned, Alejandro. So I had some stations at Deutsche Bank and Bombardier where we met. And since 2017, I'm an entrepreneur. I do my own stuff. One topic is I founded the People Mobility Alliance, which brings together different corporate functions, but also different cultures to solve problems and foster collaboration. And as part of this journey with the People Mobility Alliance, I also joined the startup scene. I became a business angel, and in this journey, being a business angel, I came across Alex. At the time, he was a founder of a startup. He will talk about that. But yeah, these insights into the HR tech ecosystem gave me a lot of experience, but also perspectives on what can be done with the right mindset. And the end of the story is we are collaborating. The three of us, and Alex, how do you? What's your part in our podcast here?
Thanks, Daniel. Hello, also hi. So I do think there is, like, technology. Everyone is talking about AI. Technology is just getting even more important than it was in the past. And from what I see, is companies are struggling with it. Because it's also wrong to just kind of start with technology. And I see there's a lot like, oh, AI is so powerful, so what do we do with it? I think this is the wrong question. Like, you don't start with the technology. Like, what's the problem that you want to solve? And there also many leaders are also struggling, because if you can't even define your problem, where the heck would you start? Like, using some technology that you hardly understand. But there's so much pressure from society nowadays. Hey, use AI. So I personally, I started to work in data science since 2016. I worked, for example, for LinkedIn, amongst others. And this is how I got to understand, like, how to use data. And that's also the basis for AI nowadays. So people who are good with data understand really well also what GenAI is about and what you can do with this technology. But I haven't stopped there. I then started being an entrepreneur, started my own startup, Skillful, Daniel, where you were a business angel back then. So I was focused on HR tech, and we started building AI products. Back then, this was like 2021, 2020, something like this. And we already started seeing the power of AI back then and what you can do, but it was a bit ahead of time. So many people were like, oh, so AI is automating the process. So in my job. So this kind of discussions that we have now a lot, they already started back then. So I do think that the technological perspective is super important, really, to put this into place. It's a very weird time for me. Why? Because, like, I think GenAI, AI is just the biggest topic since the internet. I think even bigger than the internet. But at the same time, it's hyped like crazy. And everyone is just like, Alex, what can we do with AI? What can we do with AI? But again, I don't think that this is the right first question to ask. And this is where I also see a lot of friction. And when we started discussing, Alejandro, then at some point, I also got into training bigger corporates. And this is how we met then at Zalando. So I do see that how entrepreneurs are using AI is very different from how AI is used in corporates. So in a way, I can see how the future will be. They're super advanced, like entrepreneurs are just the first ones to use it. Sure. And they're really leading the way. And corporates just are not there yet. Bigger companies are not there yet. And I would love to discuss with you in more detail, why does this gap exist and how can we close it? Yep. And also seeing your perspective, because I understand like bigger corporates cannot just move like a startup, because then there's people issues, processes that are set up, tech debt, and that it was set up in the past. So all of those things I think are really cool to discuss. And also there is such a thing as healthy friction, which I realize every time when we talk, we have different opinions, and this is why it's so nice to really hear your point of view. And I add my point of view from the technical point.
Of course. Before we start discussing the frictions and the different perspectives, let's talk about the common denominator, which is CPO. So we started to discuss, and we had, as you said, Alex, we had the project together last year and this year, 2025 and 2026, educating or enabling corporate procurement and global mobility members in applying AI. And then in the discussion, we had a lot of interaction on how to structure the course and what's actually the goal of the training course. And this is, I think, where the first time it showed we have different goal, or at least there's a different way on how to reach this goal. And this is where I think at the beginning it was Alejandro and myself bullying each other and say, I always said, we are talking about people, like chief people officer, CPO people. And you were always coming with, yeah, the people, yes, of course, they need to be engaged with and they need to be trained. But at the end of the day, it's all about cost and how to make the company cost efficient. And this is where what kind of CPO are you?
So I guess part of the bullying, just to take your joke, is defining what the P in CPO means, right?
Exactly.
So we know it in procurement from already the 80s and the 90s. CPO as Chief Procurement Officer started probably in the automotive world where CPOs were playing a bigger role. And then, of course, the people in tech came and the Chief Product Officer because they were building products. And then HR somehow in the late 2000s and 10s moved from HR to people and culture. So just from historical perspective, I think the CPO name belongs to procurement because we were before you guys call yourself people and culture and before even product existed in terms of technology, right?
Mm-hmm.
This is what I believe that CPO is a procurement, but that doesn't matter. At the end of the day, I think what you said is, and I'm talking about cultural corporate transformation. And I think, Alex, you mentioned very valid points, right? I think in corporate world, they tend to use technology to transform what they already do, but not really transform, but rather make it better or efficient. And I think AI is not about only make it better, efficient, or innovation. AI is a disruption. So you need to rethink a lot of things. It's not only doing what you did better or faster, it's actually to do it differently. And I think in the mind of some leaders, this has not arrived. What they think AI will make is what they already do, just better. And I think that is the approach that startups don't do. What they do is they use AI to completely change a business model, for example, right? And I think that's part of the education or enablement we're trying to do. And as we said at the beginning, a lot has to do with the mindset. So if you have the mindset to do what you do, not change at all, you just want to do it a bit better or a bit faster or a bit more efficient, AI, yes, will help you, but it's not a competitive advantage compared to the people who are willing to disrupt the business model. And I think this is a bit probably the difference, or one of the difference, not the only one, but one of the difference in certain corporates versus maybe some startups, right? And then the startups, because they are a greenfield, they can start from scratch more or less. They are just completely changing the model. And I think that would be maybe one topic we can discuss is how to change that mindset.
Yeah.
That the point of using AI is not to do it better. The point of using AI is to completely do it differently.
Yeah.
And with that, you can take a competitive advantage versus your competitors or other companies and so on. And I think this is something that I've seen in different industries that has not really arrived yet.
Yes, and I would like to add one more thing. When we talk about mindset, or you mentioned mindset quite often now, and I fully support this term. Important in my world is collaboration. So people across silos and cultures and functions, they should collaborate. And I wanted to have like a what's it called, a flashback. So when we met the first time, I think it was back in 2014 or something, at Bombardier here in Berlin. I was in the department of global mobility, which belonged to HR, and you were new to Bombardier at the time, at procurement, and you knocked at the door and said, "Daniel, what are you doing?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm working in this global mobility field." Back then, it was very much transactional and administrative, a lot of outsourcing of activities. And I think this is where you, with your productivity, like working cross-silo or across silo, you brought the benefits of functional collaboration to the table for Bombardier. I think, and this also eventually led to this CPO3 format. But maybe if you could elaborate a bit on what have we done back at the Bombardier times, what was your perspective, and if Alex would have been there back in the days, 10 years ago, what could we have done even better?
Yes. No, that's a valid point. I think this is already 12 years ago, more or less. The best collaboration brings you the best result because nobody holds the full truth, right?
Mm-hmm.
And at that time, we were under certain economical conditions at the company. So we needed to look at how can we improve our cost base, right? And from procurement perspective, you never buy for yourself. You always buy on behalf of somebody else, a department, a cost center, a business unit, and so on. So the idea was at that time to look at all main cost, right? And look at if there are opportunities to make it more cost efficient.
Mm-hmm.
And so in your areas, you mentioned there was a lot of services outsourced, which means you had to deal with external partners.
Yes.
And therefore, we wanted to look into contracts, into how the cost model works, what is the price, what are the conditions, and so on. And I'm not the expert in global mobility. You are the expert. And my role is to orchestrate expertise within different departments from a commercial perspective, right? And that's where we engage in this initiative to look at all your contracts, challenge suppliers, understand the market, and so on. I think what would have changed having someone like Alex is that at that time, let's say technology play less of a role because you would have more like standard SaaS solutions and more like using people to deliver services.
Yeah.
I think if we would fast forward to today with all the opportunities in technology, we would have needed someone like Alex on the table to not only help us on the commercial side, on the functional side, but also on the technology side, which would have challenged, first of you, Daniel, if your process make sense at all, maybe we can disrupt internally first, but also from the provider perspective, are there other solutions than the standard SaaS or service providers that we can solve the problem with different technology? And I think in today's world, having technology at the decision-making table is a must, because now technology, not only the internet or software as a service, but now with AI, you basically have no choice than have also product people, technology people at the table that can help you navigate the tech part, right?
Yes.
And then together, the commercial part, the functional part, and the technology part, I think we would have probably disrupt some of the processes that you used to have,
yes,
and rethink the model.
Yes. And just to add on that, if I think about back in the days, I think the two of us, we've been striving for excellence in our respective areas of expertise, but we had these limitations in terms of connectivity, efficient processes, use of technology. And I just want to bring one example, what I'm dealing with or what I've been observing over the last years in terms of tech development. It all started with these shared service organizations. This was the holy grail in terms of bringing efficiency, reducing cost and stuff. And this I think this was the foundation or the basis for creating HR tech or using HR tech. So you do standardize and centralize certain repetitive tasks. You bring them into the shared service organization, and then the next step is HR tech by really digitizing it and automating it. Then we had Corona, and during Corona, this whole stuff of how can we collaborate remotely in a decentralized way? How can we collaborate asynchron? So this I think this was then the evolution to work tech. So we started with shared service organization, people driven, repetitive tasks. We had HR tech, managing HR processes at scale. And then we go into work tech, which is more how can people work together in different silos. And now, and this is my favorite topic, and I think AI can very much help here. And so I see a big opportunity, people tech. So people tech really brings technology as a normal ideally behavior using AI, using technology based on a platform or something, brings normal people into the tech world. And I would say I call it people tech. Maybe we discuss it later more in depth. But what's your opinion on this whole tech development over the last years, and how do you see the impact of AI on this whole development, Alex?
Yeah, tricky topic. I mean, first of all, I mean, I wasn't a Bombardier like 10 years ago, not because I'm too young for this, but just simply because I remember it wasn't even a choice. Like when you're interested in technology and you want to be at the leading edge, you go to companies like LinkedIn, Facebook, Amazon, and so on. And what I see, I mean, I was working, for example, at LinkedIn. We did a lot of stuff internally because like those companies, they were able to hire this very, there was a big scarcity of tech talent. But those companies overhired, especially during Corona. They started overhiring like crazy. So they were kind of hoarding all these tech people that they actually didn't even need. So they started creating internal projects. Oh, let's solve this internally. Let's solve this internally. I think it was too much. I think like they definitely overhired, and I think they also realized it at some point. But the other side is that there was this old world, non-tech world, and those companies weren't even really able to hire those people. Maybe they weren't even thinking of it, but it's probably from both sides. I was also not too much interested to go into, let's say, the old world, or like old industries. And I think Corona was definitely, like, especially for HR, a big change. All of a sudden, like, it became a very important topic. Not saying it's not an important topic now, but it got less important over the last years again. And now we also have discussions, even like, do we see a 1 billion company with just one person? So how much do we need to talk, let's say, about people if we get more efficient? So where's the world headed? I think this is an important part, and this is where the role of HR is changing. What's the role of AI in this? I do think now, for the very first time, I'm talking a lot to CTOs and entrepreneurs. For the very first time, we have the situation that the bottleneck is not on the technical side anymore. It's a leading field in AI, like kind of all these AI agents for software development, working like crazy. The level, like it's just really like, I guess, like there are companies where almost 100% of the code is written by AI nowadays. We are at that point already, like in leading tech companies and startups, for example. And there is a gap to corporates, but I do think now they have a big chance. Companies, let's say, from the non-tech and also bigger companies, they have a big chance now to really catch up and to work on stuff more and more internally. But it comes with risks, and they're not used to it. So we're back to this topic of mindset. If you haven't built too much stuff internally because this was not your core business, so I guess like tech stuff, AI stuff is not the core business of Bombardier. So if all of a sudden Bombardier starts to work on internal stuff with AI, like they need to learn how to do this first. Right, it's not like startups. It's not like kind of me who's working like in this field for 10 years and I built X products already. Like with AI, we're not starting from scratch, right? And we also don't have all this overhead with leading like, I don't know, 1,000, 10,000 people, and you need to manage this side of things as well. So I do think it's a really like a very important point here that corporates now have the chance really to use AI to move more and more stuff to build internal tools for themselves and use AI, and they got rid of this technical bottleneck, and I think they should make use of it. But I see they're not good at this at the moment.
Can I ask a question to our people and culture colleague here? And I agree with Alex, what just he mentioned, and therefore this will be a huge challenge for the HR departments, because in order to disrupt business models, you also need to disrupt the way you hire talent, the way you develop talent, the way you describe roles, tasks, and so on, right? So from your perspective, Daniel, would like to listen. Where do you think that the 2 or 3 areas HR needs to disrupt itself first, to look at how people is being hired, managed, developed in the future? Because going into a bit in the future, when everything will be more agentic, for example, you might need different skills. So in the past, we developed people, on leadership, or functional expertise, right? Rather, you were a manager, managing a team, you need to develop some leadership skills and so on. How do you hire people? How do you motivate people? And so on, right? Or you have the domain expertise where you were more an expert in a field. And then you need to give the training to develop those skills. But in the future, managers might not manage people. They might rather manage, for example, agents, right? There's a different skill for that. And how do you motivate people that like to lead people, but they will not lead people anymore? And on the other side, you have domain experts who probably AI might be able to do most of the tasks, at least the operational, the tactical tasks. So how do you develop those skills so that these people are still providing value with a certain level of soul expertise that AI cannot cover, right? And I think for that, the current setup that people and culture has will not work. And the mindset of how HR works today in a corporation, it will just not work. And I can tell you from experience, I think one of the things that maybe we don't agree, that I challenge the HR community, is that HR is still too transactional, FTE, standard process based, right? With, let's say, develop talent cycles, promotion cycles, and everything is quite strict into standard processes and so on. Partly is because there are regulations that constrain a little bit the freedom of how HR would like act in certain corporations. But on the other side, I think HR needs to move more to the front and really, how do you on the one side, bring this disruption into the company, within the department, to lead companies to the next level? Because one thing I think the three of us agree, whether it's AI or other technology, people are still the center of the company.
Yes.
Whether it's consumers or your customers are people, or the internal employees, whether they're a lot or little, doesn't matter if it's a one-person company or a 10,000-person company. So, being said that, if customers and employees are at the center, but we have completely change of environment surrounding them because of AI or technology or volatility, geopolitics, and so on, but it has to start with your own department. How do you think people and culture needs to change, and rather soon, to drive that?
This was now 2 minutes. A 2 minutes question. So quite complex. I mean, first of all, I'm really happy that you are confirming companies and organizations are all about people. So it's not just robots and agents and bots working somewhere. So I think this is our common ground. This is great. To answer your complex question, which touches a lot of points, let me elaborate a bit, but that might be a bit mixed up. If you look at Germany, so I think we have to really zoom out and not just sitting in a company and trying to identify the mistake. I think it's a societal topic. So how were we raised as individuals in a society? What's the education system we went through? What was the expectation and the mindset we learned from our parents, from school? And I mean, I have two sons being in school here in Berlin, and I must say, I'm not really happy with the content and with the approach the school is trying to bring across how to live your life. But this is why I engage with the school and try to set up courses like how to deal with money, what is economy. These are the basics. This is where young people or people themselves learn how to navigate through an environment. And I think on a societal level in Germany, it's still very much employee driven. This is the ambition. You want to become you should become an employee with a high salary to have a good life. And in order to get this salary and the good life, you need to study something. And then with this mindset, I would say people come into with this and with these expectations, people, especially here in Germany, come into corporations. And this then the second layer. We are in a corporation. There's, at the one hand, we have the people, and on the other hand, we have the HR department, which is usually set up by the leadership in a company. And if the leadership has a traditional mindset or a traditional understanding, they regard HR as HR, managing human resources, managing numbers. So this is totally wrong approach. I think this is why the CPO thing has evolved, Chief People Officer, because now it's about the people and it's about the culture and which behaviors and mindset do organizations want to bring into their people. And so what I want to say is on organizational level, two challenges for HR or the people and culture department. Number one, leadership. What's the empowerment of my leadership to do culture programs and not just reducing costs and implement yet another global payroll system to be efficient? And on the other hand, what's the basis? Like the people working in my organization. What's their behavior? What's their mindset? And I think here, you're right. It's the job of the HR or people organization to not just administer the back office. I think this is where AI can help, really, just to get rid of this admin stuff, whether it's outsourced or in-house, doesn't matter. And then really focus on change and behavior change, like mindset topics with the people. So that I think that,
yeah, and I think I tend to agree. I think maybe you should change the name to culture and people, and not people and culture. I think culture should be first, and then people second. Because if you establish, and I want to ask Alex to follow up on this, because in startups there is a culture, and then you hire the people. And I think organizations tend to be, larger organizations tend to be all the way around. First, you hire the resource,
exactly,
and then you figure it out how the resource fits into your culture. And therefore, for me, I think maybe one point that I can see from the outside, not being an HR person, is I think the department should do culture first, and then find the people for the culture.
Yes.
And I think today we're doing it completely the opposite, right? And I also part of the problem, I've been a leader myself. I've hired people. You have open positions. You're looking for people just to hire because you have the free FTE. And if you don't hire fast, they might cancel the position. And then we get into this machine of just hiring resources, right? And I think maybe one disruption where the HR can change would be culture and people, not people and culture. That's my opinion. I think once strong companies have a strong culture.
Yes, I just wanted, before we go to Alex, because I forgot to add this because of your question, it was complex. What I also wanted to say is, I think it's not just the traditional companies having these hierarchical systems. It's also startups. It's also startups who they claim to have a great culture and they have the table kicker and all this stuff. But when it comes to employees and their earnings, the benefits and stuff, they tend to think in hierarchy as well. Because once I'm a senior, once I'm a director, once I'm a VP, I earn more money. I have the right and the expectation to have more money. And this is employee behavior. And what I would like to see, and many companies, also SME, like Mittelstand companies, they do it. They encourage their employees to think entrepreneurial. So which product are you working on? Which service are you working on? Which added value do you bring to the company, our organization? I think these are the questions which need to be asked, and not, it's this old question, what can the government do for me? No. What can you do for your company? And I think here, and now to bring it to you, Alex, I think leadership, functional leadership, but also employees, if they know how to apply AI in a native way, I think the whole entrepreneurial spirit and mindset can be developed pretty quickly.
And I think the key question is like, who's responsible for this? Now, like, and this is where, like, because every time I go kind of from the startup world to a more traditional environment, my feeling is that people are expecting too much help from outside, like as if they are not responsible for change, and this is why HR also exists. They are supposed to support, but I do think like there is, for example, a saying in the startup world where you just say, hire slow, fire fast. And that goes back to this whole culture topic. If the culture doesn't fit, it's actually, it's like from a company, from a startup point of view, it's better to part ways. And there is, it's just not a good fit. Like we need people who are like completely performing, who owning stuff. You just cannot hide in a startup. And that's the issue. You can't hide in bigger corporates. You can blame others. Like if the organization is so big that there are many departments, you just optimize your own stuff instead of optimizing what is best for the entire company. What's the impact that I can make as an individual person? Of course, the impact is bigger in a startup. So, and this is why, like, I mean, if you do something in a startup, you will feel the result in a good and bad way, in a sense, right? But in a bigger company, if you do something, you hardly feel the impact of it. And I think this is what is disempowering people. And my experience is that HR's reaction is like, it's too friendly. It's not like, oh, well, then, the leadership team was kind of maybe putting too much pressure or something like this. Like there's a lot of discussions like, how can we support, how can we protect employees? But in my feeling, not so much discussion around like, what did the employee do wrong? Like maybe we should put some responsibility on them as well, because right now with AI, I mean, it's clearly it's clearly a big thing. We saw how internet has changed everything. Now AI is changing everything. So if people are saying, well, why would I learn more about AI in my spare time? That's a fair point. I mean, it's up to you to put priorities as you want, and if family is more important, then don't do AI stuff in the evening. That's perfectly fine, but just don't complain about the result, because if you want to be very valuable for a company, you need to think how AI is going to change your own role and what's your responsibility to learn, right? And I think this is really a key point where I feel there is a cultural difference a lot between kind of startups who are just not even questioning, am I learning AI? Should I learn? Oh, it's evening. I prefer doing this and that.
Yeah.
Like founders are just like, their life is just eaten up by their startup. So you're naturally thinking 24/7 as an entrepreneur about, I mean, you know it too, right? It's not just like tech startups. You're an entrepreneur, like everything is around you.
I think it's a big difference, right? Because in startups, the leadership is also usually the founders. So they have skin in the game, right? In other companies, you have more like professional managers leading the company. So it's a bit different situation, I would say. I still think you will probably not convert professional managers in founders because it's a career path. It's not a grade or title. But I think you mentioned one topic that I think is key is who's actually responsible and accountable. And that responsibility, accountability, if you can trickle down to all the layers in the organization, then you will have ownership, right? And I think this, and Daniel, you mentioned also how we empower the people as well, the same, right? So if you have a culture of all the decisions are being made by one or two persons at the top, then you will have a hierarchical culture, period. If you have a culture where you delegate a lot of decision-making to the experts, regardless of the grade or the hierarchical position, then you will have an organization of owners, that they feel responsible, that whatever decision they make has an impact, positive or negative, right? And I think this is, the difference. And it's up to the leadership to decide what kind of culture. I think culture, it has to be created and lived by the top. Because if the top is not willing to disrupt itself, why should somebody sitting in some of it also do it?
Yeah.
And I think this leading by example, and I think this is where people and culture, I prefer the term culture and people, plays a big role at making sure that HR is a boss topic. If at the top they do not lead the culture, why should somebody somewhere in an office do it? And I think if you look at successful companies, I mean, we can talk about the tech companies, but also in the Mittelstand, or family-owned companies where you have usually the founder or the son or daughter of the founder or in third generation or fourth generation, doesn't matter. even those companies that are successful at that size, doesn't have to be big corporation, doesn't have to be Silicon Valley, can also be somewhere in the middle of Germany, is because the owners or the leaders of that organization live the culture. So if you see that, and also in the Mittelstand, you see that as well, that you see that they don't drive luxury cars, because every cent that goes out of the company, it hurts them personally. Then you have companies where employees work there for 60 years, just to put a big number there, because they do feel that the leadership is leading by example, and therefore they also follow. And therefore for me, because we're talking about the topic of corporate transformation, I think it should be cultural transformation. And I understand that there are restrictions of government and public schools and education, yes, but still within the microcosmos of a company, you can still influence those people that are coming from different backgrounds, different education backgrounds, and so on. If you have a strong culture in a company being led by either a founder or a CEO, let's say a professional manager, in those companies, you have higher probability to be successful. And whether you're a 3 people startup, if you're a 200 people Mittelstand, or a 10,000 multinational, that doesn't matter. The size is not the decision maker in the success. I think it starts with the culture. Do you have a vision? Do you have a North Star? And do you have a culture that allows employees and leaders to get to that? And I think at least that's what I've seen in successful companies versus not so successful companies.
Yes. And our first episode is closely or is soon coming to an end. And I just wanted to also give an outlook on what the audience can expect in the next 2 sessions. I mean, today we've been discussing why we are here and why we call each other a CPO, and our observations and our differences. Also, I must say, we don't necessarily have a very different view, I would say, after our first session here. But we had, the 3 of us in 2025, I mentioned it before, we had this AI Enablement course. We developed it. I mean, at the beginning, we called it AI prompting. It came out of the PMA Academy for Global Mobility. Then Alejandro, you contacted me. How can I bring this AI prompting into my organization, in the procurement organization? We started discussing it. I brought Alex as the AI expert, and we developed this program. And now we have delivered this program to different types of companies and also to different types of functions. And in the next session or in the next episode, we will talk about what exactly we did, the bottlenecks we came across, and how we had to really develop like a journey with many different steps to take as many as possible people on board, also depending on the type of company. Are we talking about a startup, like a mid-sized company, Mittelstand, or a corporate company? And I'm very much looking forward to continue our discussion. And at this point, thank you very much to all of us, not fighting, but having a constructive discussion.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Welcome.